So I'm going to start just telling you guys how I use Silver 4 on my different sessions, on landscapes, on portraits. I've been doing a lot of model sessions in the past few months, and we're going to go through and we're going to edit some different things, and I'm just going to talk practically about how you use Silver. If you need to know how to install Silver, or you don't have Silver yet, you can go to seimeffects.com/silver, and you can get Silver 4 and pick up for Lightroom or for Capture One. If you need help installing, I'm not going to take too much time in this for installing because that's all over on the seimeffects.com/help page, and you can see how to install it in Capture One, how to install it in Lightroom, all that good stuff. So let's get started. Let's talk about black and white and Silver 4. And I'm just going to actually go through, there's a couple approaches that you can take. And let me just go back to my Lightroom. I'm going to go to the grid. There's a couple approaches you can take when you're editing. A lot of times if we're editing a Silver image, we're going for kind of craftsmanship, maybe one image. But on the other hand, if I'm doing a portrait session or something like that, I'm going to say, well, I want this group. I try to edit in groupings. So I might say, you know, here is a bunch of images. I'm going to do this pose in color. I'm going to do this pose down here in black and white. And so I have a sort of consistency. So I've talked about my workflow on this channel in other live streams. And I've talked about the fact in recent videos how I edit, how I sort, how I go through, I rate my images 5 stars, then I might put a red label on it for the best of the best. And I will sort down, and then I'll come back and edit. And I'll do like an exposure edit, for example. I can see this image here is a little dark, so I'll just do a quick edit and bump up the exposure. This one's a stop down. I'm going to push that up and this up a stop. So I can go through and do quick edits. On the other hand, I can also go into Silver, and we try to design all our preset packs so that they can quickly just be run. And so you have like a quick exposure mod to lighten it up, to darken it up. There's some contrasts, grains. The first thing you're going to see when you open Silver 4 is the IQ Silver. And I'm going to come to that in just a second because first I just want to make you acquainted with the categories. And these are going to be the same whether you're in Lightroom or whether you're in Capture One. So you can come in and you're going to be able to say, all right, here is the 0 category. The 0 is at the top so that you can come back as you edit and quickly modify. You can apply an IQ Silver like Auto Matte, like Auto Flex, right? And you can see there's a distinct difference. I put a lot of work into those first 3 presets. In the past, we had the auto presets, and these do, the Auto Matte and the Auto Flex do use some auto settings, but they're different. And you can see that Auto Matte is a little bit more gritty, it's a little bit more punchy. Auto Flex is a little bit more soft and gentle for a portrait. And then Darkroom Crush really brings up those shadows. Between those 3 presets, you could pretty much throw anything at me and I could edit a session. So let's come in and actually look at these. And let me show you the screen so you can see what I'm looking at. I'm actually going to hide me for a moment and just show you the screen. So here's 4.1 installed in Lightroom, and you're going to see these same categories, whatever you're using. Here are our IQ Silver, those 3 top presets that get us that starting point. Then below that, you're going to see grains, you're going to see vignettes, and these are kept at the top so you can get to them quickly as you're editing, okay? Classic Silver is just in version 4, the best of the best from all the versions of Silver, kind of refined and made better than ever. Then we come to the new Filmic Silver category, and we'll look at those, but really rich grains, tones. These aren't trying to be a specific film like our Filmist collection is. Filmist has color, it has black and white, and it's trying to emulate specific films. In Silver 4, I said, well, let's be a little more open-minded with it. And let's have Filmic Silver where we are taking these silver looks that may be inspired by a film or by a grain, but they're not trying to match anything. Sometimes when you try to match a classic look specifically, it's difficult because it works different on different images, on different raw files. And while we worked really hard and got great results on that in Filmist, with Silver 4, I got to be a little more open. And I think you're going to love these Filmic Silvers. These are kind of my go-to right now for black and white, quite frankly. Then you have the Bold Silver. Again, some of these classics, some of the really contrast. Then you go down to the channel mods. So let's say we apply Noctura 1600. You see we have some nice grain. We have good skin tone. what can we do with it then? Well, I could go down and I could do channel mixes. So those are going to leave the grains and the overall curves, and they're just going to change channels. So it's kind of like the way we use the red, green, and blue filters in real film. In fact, we actually have a mimic of the yellow 12, orange 56, blue 47, red 29. So these are actually meant to be inspired and kind of have the effect of when we used actual color filters, like I've shown you guys on my 4x5 and things like that. And then we can also modify with the grain. So let's say I apply this and I say, well, this grain's a little too much. I like the look, but let's do a fine grain, like a grain L2. I don't change anything else. I'm just stacking that grain on top, and it just works. Now, to do this in Capture One, I want to switch to Capture One for a brief moment and show you, because we have Silver 4. And so I can apply a look here in Silver 4. And I just want to point out, if you're going to stack, you want to click here in the options of your styles and presets in Silver. And you want to click here and make sure you turn on stack styles if you're using Capture One. Because if you don't turn on stack styles, it's just going to overwrite one style with the other. Whereas now that I have stack styles on, I can go and I can say, well, let's modify the channels, for example, and it's going to leave everything else alone. Let's change the grain, for example, and it's going to leave everything else alone. So those combinations allow you to have really good control all of the time. Let me know as we go through this. I want to keep this to about 30 minutes or so. Let me know if I'm answering your questions, and if you have questions, throw them right down here in the chat, and I'll be watching those questions. Let's come back though and go to Lightroom again and work just a little bit more with this. So I come in here. What am I going to do when I'm looking at images in Silver? I don't have to make a really long video about Silver because, quite frankly, it's pretty simple to use. And if I got an image here, I can come and I'm usually going to start with one of two ways. I'm either just going to scroll through, and you can see I have the preview turned on in Lightroom. It's gotten better than it was in the past, and I have the instant preview turned on. This can be edited from the preferences of Lightroom, and sometimes if you turn it off, it'll just show up here in the little navigator icon, but right now I have it to show in real time as I browse over. So this is how I use presets in general, is I do kind of this browse over to say, well, what works for my visualization? But I might have something here. I've gone out, I've taken an image, but a lot of times I'm just going to browse over and say, well, what looks good? Because the way my light was, the way my skin tones were, when I engineer presets, I'm thinking about not only different types of raw files, different subjects, different situations. One of the things that makes great presets, and a lot of them I know aren't great, but one of the things that makes well-engineered presets, actions, things like that, valuable tools is not because I'm trying to make your images look like my images. It's that every image, every lighting condition is different. And by making a balanced blend of different looks, I can go over and say, well, let's go to the auto matte. No, it's too dark. Let's go to auto flex. Okay, better skin tones there. Let me run the auto flex, and then I'm going to do an exposure plus mod to brighten this up. But that's still not enough, so I'm going to go right over here to this side, and I'm going to brighten up the exposure even more. And now I could do other mods. I could do grain differently. I could do the white backlight mod to kind of punch the contrast a little bit. I could do contrasty blacks mod, adding more blacks into those contrasts. So there's all these different ways that I could change this image. And then I could say, well, let's shift Control C and copy these settings, right? So usually when I copy settings, I'm going to leave exposure uncopied and white balance uncopied. Although sometimes I will copy white balance. You can see I have black and white mix selected, and let's have my grain, my vignetting, all that selected, right? So I could just go to this next image and say, well, this looks good. Let's go to the one that's next portrait in the line here. And let's just paste that and see how it looks. Shift Control V, and I must not have copied something correctly because it didn't paste my black and white settings. Aha, let's see here. Black and white. Either that or Lightroom is bugging out on me again, and it's trying to confuse me. Let's copy, and let's go over here and paste. And wonder of wonders, this new version of Lightroom, first there was a glitch when you copied and pasted that it screwed up the white balance, and I think they might have fixed that now. Now there seems to be a glitch to where it's not copying the black and white settings. So I'm not going to get too hung up on that because I want to focus on silver, not whether a bug exists. There we go. It worked that time. Maybe it's an issue with that file, but it's probably that it's a JPEG and it's not copying over the color profile the way I want. But you can see I've copied this to another image and it looks fine. And now I can come in and say, well, let's look more though, right? Here's this image of this Volkswagen on the street. It's kind of cool. How could I change that? I could adjust the channels. And as I adjust the channels, what are we doing? Let's look over here. If you look over here on the right, you can see, here's my black and white mix. And you can see as I go over each of these and click different ones, it's changing the channels distinctly. It's lightening and darkening different elements of the black and white. And so I can quickly modify this down here in the channel mods, down at the bottom in the M2 category, without changing things like my dynamic range, like the tone curve that the presets applied, like the shadows, the whites, all of that kind of stuff. All right. Then I could come down here to the M3 category of mods, which is our tint mods. And I could say, well, let's do a little bit of a blue cyanotype or a little bit of a selenium or something like that. And we've tried to keep this simple. Rather than making huge lists with a zillion variants, I can say, let's do a selenium preset on this. And if I want to change it, I can simply go over here to the color grading, or if you're using an older version of Lightroom, it's going to be in split toning, or if you're using Capture One, it's going to be in the color tools. And each program is going to work a little differently. But the fact is, you can come in here and you can say, well, I like this, but it's too much. Let's turn down a little bit of the settings, or let's adjust the tint just a little bit. Don't ever think when you use a preset that the goal is to make you not edit. The goal is to make us more efficient and to get your edits where you want them. But let's talk about doing batches a little bit. Let's say I want to do a bunch of these photos and I'm like, hey, I want to do these quickly. Well, let's go here. I'm going to select 10 or so images here. And I'm just going to go to here. I'm in the grid mode, in the G mode, the library rather, is what I should be calling it. And I'm going to click here, go to Silver 4, and let's just put one of the IQ Silver, because these are actually designed to be incredibly versatile. So I'm going to do Auto Flex on all of these, and just boom. Now, we just converted all of these to black and white, and frankly, I'm just looking as they convert over here, and they all look pretty good. Now, I could change these individually. I could adjust exposure. I can look at this, which was shot in JPEG, and be like, this is too overexposed. Let's turn it down a little bit. I can look at this one and say, well, let's turn these up a little bit. But you can see how quickly, how very quickly I can get to these black and white conversions. And that works. But let's go to another image. Let's say I want to be here. Let's take a landscape this time instead of a portrait. All right. And let's go in and see what we got. I did IQ Silver, it looks good. IQ Silver Auto Matte, a little more rich in the blacks. Darkroom Crush really kind of brings up the shadows of the blacks. And on some images, you're gonna notice it like crazy. In other images, not as much. So let's go to a portrait again real quickly and then come back. If I click Darkroom Crush here, you're gonna see what it does. It's beautiful for skin tones. I actually love Darkroom Crush, even though it pushes it a little bit hard because it's smoothing out. You can actually look at the curve and how I've used that. We're doing a lot of smoothing out on highlights and lifting on shadows to give this really rich kind of classic film, not super contrasty, but just rich. And so if I want more contrast, I would use something like Auto Matte, Auto Flex. But if I want something that's just versatile and kind of soft and delicate, this is perfect. I can take this, I can pump up the exposure maybe a little, and I can still add some more contrast. I can edit it manually over here, or I can just say, well, I like the Darkroom Crush, I like how the shadows look, but I want a little bit more shadows and leave the highlights alone. All I have to do is go to the Contrast Blacks mod, and I'm gonna put a little more black into there. I don't know if I like that better, but it does work, doesn't it? Okay, let's come back to our landscape that we were working on, because I know we have people that are shooting all types. I'm going to reset this. Remember, in Seim presets, any of the header presets, you can click and reset. the image, okay? So this is a little dark. This is like a stop under. I'm gonna pump this up just a little bit and focus on the exposure first. So here we have this nice image. Let's crop it just a little bit. This is down on the river in Tamasopo, San Luis Potosi, Mexico. And this is good, but obviously I'm gonna want a really nice contrasty one. And I've worked with this one on, or rather this scene on different images before. I'm gonna go straight to bold silver. Bold silver I'm probably not usually gonna use for a portrait because generally I'm gonna want softer skin tones, you know, lifted shadows a little bit. On the other hand, for a landscape, I might go straight to a filmic. So I could do like HP push. I could do Fidelity 800. I mean, these are all looking really good. The thing about black and white is you can take one black and white and use it for everything. And if you had good light and good color and you just had a black and white conversion, a lot of your images would look good. But the subtlety of black and white and what we've really brought into Silver 4 with gusto is this idea that a lot of subtle variations matter, and that getting in there and working with channels and the curves and all the subtleties, this is why Silver 4 works so well, because we're working directly with a raw file. We don't have to export to a plugin. We don't have to go out and make a second generation file. All the information is right here in the raw file, guys, and that is really cool. So let's go to something bold though, like Yosemite Contrast or Jungle Waters. This is actually a favorite look for this kind of a water scene. And you can see what it's doing versus some of the others. It's making the whites really bright. It's affecting the greens in the channels. It's keeping that really rich. Look at this histogram up here on the right, okay? We're not clipping on either side. We're not clipping in the blacks, even though we have really, really black. There's still some detail down there. And we're not clipping on those whites. So we're holding the shadow and highlight while using the entire zonal range, right? Don't think we got to crush everything into midtones like this when we do a histogram, because especially with a black and white, you don't have color to separate items and to separate focus. That's why the light is so important, that the light be magical in a good black and white. And so when you're working with black and white, I'm often looking up at that histogram and saying, well, am I bringing in the color range? Excuse me, the tonal range. Am I bringing in the blacks? I could take away blacks here, right? I could lift the blacks, not that much, but I could lift the blacks and make them more mid-tone and a little more safe. And you can see our histogram changing accordingly. And it's not that it's bad, but when I use the tonal range and I basically have that full 10 stops, that zone 1 or zone 0, all the way to almost zone 10. So usually I'm trying to encompass in a black and white, and this isn't a rule. Some images you want to be flatter, some you want more contrasty. But if I'm doing something like a landscape and I want that rich textural detail and the contrast, I'm probably gonna try to have tonal ranges all the way from zone 1, like we're seeing down here, and all the way up to zone 9, not clipped into white, but close to white. Now, we can't show the zones here. If we were using Lumist actions, we have a real-time zone map. And it's great if you want to go in and you convert a black and white, and then you want to refine it more, you want to refine the zones, or a color image for that matter. Lumist is perfect for that. And so Silver 4 is for conversions. You can still use things like Alchemist. You can still use things like Lumist and actions in Photoshop and burning and dodging. The power of those tools isn't really diminished, except that we can do so much now in Lightroom that a lot of the conversions are good. If I have a great landscape, I'm going to take it in and I'm going to work it in Photoshop. I'm going to look at those zones in Lumist and I'm going to play with it further. But if I'm doing a portrait session and I'm trying to get it out the door and I have, 100 images to edit and I'm focusing on that session, I'm not going to take every one of those images into Photoshop. Yes, when I go to print the best of the best, I'm probably going to do some tweaking in Photoshop, like I've said for years. Let's actually go here. And you can see this is a little contrasty. Let's reset this portrait here. And let's lighten this up just a little bit. I think I underexposed a touch. Let's go, not to the bold silver. You can see those are a little intense for a portrait. Not that they're bad, it's all preferential. But let's go to something like filmic silver. And let's find a nice filmic. A lot of times with portraits, a little bit of softness. A lot of these just look really good here, guys, because we're implementing some grain. You can see some of them have more shadow on this side of the face where others are lifting. So it's kind of like we have this kit where we have this range of different films that all give a different look. I like this one. Let's do Fidelity 800 and you can see that it just looks really nice. Okay, so Again, shout out to all of you in the live stream. I hope you're doing well. I hope I'm covering this. Before I end this, because I'm probably going to make this about 30 minutes long, so I'll keep this going a little bit longer. We've covered in Silver the fundamentals, the categories. The IQ Silver is phenomenal if you want to do any sort of batch images, or if you just want a good starting point. And a lot of times I'll take an IQ Silver image and just run with it, right? Here's the autoflex. It looks good. Let's pump the exposure up a little bit. Let's crop it a little bit. I'm going to press R, bring that crop in a little bit on this street portrait scene, and boom. Now I could come here. Again, we're in the 0 category. Let's put a vignette. There's a couple vignette options here. This one looks good. And let's do that vignette, and I like it. Now I could also use something like the film detail, FSG, which is going to do a little grain, a little noise, and a little sharpening. A lot of the presets. So here's the thing in Silver 4. There's some grain in the auto presets, and there's grain in the filmic silvers, because those are meant to have filmic looks. The other ones are not going to change, for the most part, your grain. They're going to leave it neutral on your grain, your noise, all that detail kind of stuff. So if you run something like Silver Skin, right, this looks really nice. And then I might say, well, let's put some grain on it. And I can just go up here to the mods and choose from the grain that I want. So let's reset that and just kind of get an idea of how we did it from the start. I'm exposuring up just a little bit. I'm going to go to Silver Skin 2, nice and bright. And then I'm going to do a grain L2 mod or a filmic detail FSG mod, which will actually affect sharpening and things like that a little as well. I can go either way. But as you can see, it's really good. You can see how I can do different grains here. And frankly, I think it looks nice. Let me come back. Let's go to another scene. Let's go to a night scene like this one right here. And I don't want to make this seem too simplistic, because we really are just coming in, applying a preset, tweaking a couple settings, maybe adding a mod. But silver's not hard to use. Let's go down to bold silver for this, because I want to bring out the texture in these panels. And so as I browse through, you can see different ones are bringing out different levels of black. You can see that Aspen here really has a lot of black. We're still not clipping though, but we have this strong contrast between blacks and white. Maybe too much. It's all perspective, but let's use something like Contrast X, because that's really bringing out the detail. It's almost surreal how much detail is in the texture of these panels, and I like it. I think it looks good. Let's go to this one here down on the river in Jalitla, Mexico. And I'm going to adjust my crop just a little bit. And what do we got? Let's go up here. Again, where am I going to start? When I open up a group of images or a single image, I'll probably just quickly do the IQ Silver, because I can get a quick look of different perspectives. Darkroom Crush here is a little low contrast, but it kind of gives me this look that's really filmic. It really pulls down the highlights. There's contrast. You can see we're not bunching our histogram into the middle. There's a lot of light to dark. We're going all the way from about zone 2 all the way to about zone 7. So we have a pretty wide range of tonal value. And I could go here maybe and use this effect and just bump up the texture just a little bit. And I can just do that manually if I want to do maybe texture and clarity a little higher in this case to make it a little more gritty, but it looks good. On the other hand, I could use something from Classic Silver and find something like this, like an HDR Silver. Let's look at one of the HDR Silvers. They're pretty punchy, and you can see that these are bringing out a lot. I almost need to turn my exposure down with this because I'm bringing up the shadows so much. So I'm going to put my exposure back to 0, and HDR Silver gives us a really nice look. So you have your IQ Silver, you have your mods, you have your Classic Silver, which is just meant to be versatile, no grain, nothing like that. Filmic Silver is giving us that kind of filmic feel. It's inspired by film, even though it's not trying to be a specific film. Bold Silver tends to be more intense, gritty, strong contrasts, really powerful stuff. And then you come down to the mods, like the M2 mods for the channels and the M3 color tint mods, where we can just change around and get some nice color tints. Now, of course, if you're going for a platinum or something like that, I might leave the color tint off and then go into something more advanced like signature emulsion to get a really good platinum or a really good wet plate or a really good cyanotype. Because in Photoshop, the reason I make those actions is because we can go a lot more profoundly into that. But I think overall, we're editing quickly and efficiently, and it's just working. And so if we take these different images, it doesn't matter what image I'm working on. I know that all I really have to do is give myself a good starting point, maybe adjust my exposure a little bit, and just kind of browse over. Okay, let's come back out here. I think my OBS studio crashed, but we should still be right back in there. Let me know if you guys can see me as we resume the stream. And I'm just looking at your questions here before we wrap up as well. And we'll just wrap up with a couple more image edits. But yes, I think we're right on track here. So let me switch back to screen combo mode and we'll look at that. Kenneth asks, is it in your opinion just a matter of preference as to doing white balance and exposure before applying these styles? Yeah, I think it is, because again, we're dealing with a raw file. So it really doesn't matter if I go into develop mode, different presets, and I do this intentionally. I design different presets so that some of them lean lighter, some of them lift shadows more, some of them pull highlights more. And I try to name them efficiently in this. There's different levels of contrast. So some presets, just like films, are going to feel brighter, even though none of the presets are adjusting the exposure. Okay, I leave exposure to the photographer because you can't predict it. The only presets, I should retract that, the only presets that will adjust the exposure is a preset that uses auto settings, like the IQ Silver and the Auto Matte use the auto settings and the Darkroom Crush. They're actually using the auto tone settings and then combining that with the curves and all the things I've done under the hood. So those are kind of meant to be auto and quick, but they're incredibly versatile. None of the other presets in Silver are going to adjust exposure. And so you can see if I click different presets, almost everything is changing, but exposure is being left alone. So you can pretty much work fluidly, and pretty much always white balance is left alone. Sometimes for black and white, I'll have a preset that changes white balance because it can affect the balance of the color channels and get a certain look if I'm adding more warmth, for example. White balance does affect a black and white because it affects the colors of the image, which in turn affects how the color channels respond to each tonal value. So white balance is important in a black and white, but it's not going to give you this huge shift like in my color presets, where unless I have like an auto white balance preset in Power Workflow, for example, my color presets are never going to modify white balance or exposure either, because exposure is subjective and you may or may not have got what you wanted in camera, but the computer can't really tell that for us, and presets can't either. It can just guess. So generally I avoid adjusting exposure. And white balance as well. I rarely will use auto white balance. I'll generally use auto white balance in camera, and then if I need to, I'll adjust it manually up here. So usually, if from a workflow perspective, if you go watch my recent workflow video, I talk about working in the grid and just quickly editing exposure in groups so that I can see kind of an overview like this right here and say, okay, everything's exposed right. I'm generally not going to do that with white balance. The grid is for rating, looking at an overview, seeing what my session looks like, maybe adjusting exposure. Then I'm going to go in and either on an individual image level, and then probably subsequently in groups, copying and pasting or applying presets to that group, I'm going to have kind of a more intense approach to being efficient by saying, okay, I like this image, I like the process, I'm going to apply it to these others. We're going to do that here in just a second, just to show you an example. Peter says, is Silver strictly for conversion, or can it be useful for images from a monochrome sensor like the Q2? And yes, it can. The reason I'm not a huge fan of the monochrome sensors, I know there's some really cool cameras that have monochrome sensors, but one of the most powerful things about digital with black and white is that you have these channels. And I feel like there's so much being lost if you were to shoot just in monochrome, because basically you're only allowing the channels to be controlled in camera at that point, or you're only allowing one sensor. Now, I know that we could talk about the minimalistic approach and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not knocking anyone that likes a camera that does this. But yes, if you have an image that's already monochrome, you can still edit it with silver. Just bear in mind that the color settings aren't going to affect. So the edits will be there, right? If I do Darkroom Crush or if I do a filmic look, you can see it's changing curves, it's changing shadows and highlights. All of that stuff is still going to apply to a pre-existing monochrome image. it's just not going to convert the color because there's no color there. And so the channels are effectively going to be ignored. And that's why I've never really pursued an only monochrome camera for my black and white, is even though I have a visualization here, the subtlety of being able to control those channels later, I just really enjoy it. But yes, absolutely, you can use it on a monochrome image. Let's wrap up here with just an image like here in this portrait. So what would I do here? I'm not going to edit a whole session because I did a video on here recently about editing a whole session. But let's say I have this image and I'm like, okay, what are we going to do with it? Let's edit one of these. Okay, so I might say, let's use Darkroom Crush, but no, it's not quite right. Let's go down to the Filmics of this portrait of Ivana, and I'm going to find one. I'm just kind of browsing over. I'm going to find one that brings out kind of the moodiness of this, the grain. Pinhole 800 looks really good. Maybe it's a little flat. Wax contact is beautiful here, but I'm going to bump the exposure up just a little bit. And I'm going to pull the blacks down manually. So there's nothing wrong with doing that manually. And we got a nice image just like that. Let's go up here, and I'm going to put a vignette. And maybe not. I don't want to darken her face too much. I might just manually, with the M key, put a gradient in from the left and darken it up just a little bit. Okay? Now, this looks good. In this case, since these images are so similar, I'm going to copy my settings, and I'm going to include exposure and gradiated filters because these are all effectively the same pose. Copy those, and I'm just going to paste that same setting to all of these images, all these 4, that is. And if I was doing editing a full session, there might be 15 of a similar look, but you can see it quickly just copies those over. Let's look at those in the mode here. And oops, I don't want to dim that screen down. It's going to dim down the main screen. And you can see that we just edited all these, and they have this synergy between them. They're all the same filmic look. In this case, I even copied the gradient because they're all the same pose. But if I was doing a wider range of poses, positions in the frames, I would probably come back and do those gradients manually because it could cause me a problem. But I will often copy vignettes, things like that. It's important just, I think, to keep the variety alive and just to be able to work with whatever situation that you need to work with. We've gone for quite a while here. I know we could go in, I could edit more images, but I think I've kind of covered this. I've covered the fundamentals. If you guys want more videos about silver, I can make more videos. If you want more videos looking at the Capture One aspect or certain nuances of it, because we've got kind of this live stream setup that's set up now, and you can see that it's improved radically over like when I'm live streaming on a phone or just doing a screen. I'm working on improving our live streams and doing more of those on this channel that are more like edited videos that actually are good audio and good production value and go all the way through. I don't know how long I've been going, probably too long, but I hope the quality was good on this. I know we had a little glitch where I lost you for just a minute, but we're about 30 minutes here. I think it's about time to wrap up, and I'm just gonna look here. Let's see here. And yes, in Thin Air, by all means, send me an email if you have some questions on that. I hope I've covered all of your guys' questions and that I've showed you sufficiently how to use Silver. If you're still a little confused on how to install Silver for Camera Raw, for Lightroom, for Capture One, that's all right over here on seimfx.com/help. By the way, if you're using the latest versions of Lightroom, normally when you install in Lightroom, it's also going to show up in Camera Raw, which you can get from the filter menu of Photoshop. And so Camera Raw is more integrated into Photoshop now, and it just kind of works like any other filter, and your presets should show up in there. But if they don't, you can go to the help page, and it talks about how to manually install the presets for Camera Raw. If you're using older legacy pre-Lightroom 7.3 versions, Lightroom 6, things like that, make sure you use the legacy presets. Everything's going to work pretty much the same. Of course, there's some new features in the latest versions of Lightroom that give us a little bit of edge, but I work pretty hard to try and keep compatibility. And in 4.1, if you haven't downloaded 4.1 yet, make sure you have it, because there was a lot of bug fixes, especially for legacy versions. There was the new IQ Silver presets that we talked about here, and tons of updates to bring the Capture One version more refined, because it's a lot of work when I make Lightroom presets and then to have to bring those over for our Capture One users. I have to do a lot of tweaking and refinement. So yes, absolutely, Tim. As soon as this is done, it might take YouTube a few minutes to render it, but you can of course come back and watch the replay of this. And I'll put a link to this on the Silver page too for new users. If you don't have Silver and you like what you see here, head over to seimfx.com/silver and pick up Silver. You guys are gonna love it. It's guaranteed, just like all our presets and actions. And gosh, it's been what, 12, 15 years that I've been working on the Silver line. And just with every version, we just refine it and it just keeps getting better and better and better. And I'm really proud of it, honestly. Silver is pretty amazing. So I think that's all. I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all to all our customers and supporters, and subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed this, because not all the videos I do here are related to my products. We do a lot of hands-on videos, portrait sessions, things like that. And yes, and Raphael, great question, Raphael. If you have Silver 2, Silver 3, Silver 1, whatever, and you didn't get an upgrade code, you can still get the 50% off upgrade to Silver 4. Just shoot me an email, effects@seimstudios.com, so we can look up your order and get you your code. So by all means, we can get your upgrade. And of course, you can find the contact info on seimfx.com as well. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Carlos, C is más o menos igual in Capture One. Capture One is diferente, pues es mi ajustar la estilos para Capture One por más o menos la igual efectos y la categoría es algo. Perdón, mi feo español. Okay, guys, so yes, like I was just saying there, if you don't speak Spanish, it's pretty much the same now in 4.1, pretty much the same in Lightroom and Capture One. Of course, there's some different features because these programs work differently. But in terms of the categories, the tools that I've built into Silver 4, I really work hard to unify those and make it so it's as seamless as possible. So you could be editing in Lightroom one moment, and you could be moving over and editing in Capture One another moment, and it's just gonna work. I want that kind of good workflow. We've always been about good workflow and good technique here, and I think we're good.